Welcome back. So as we close Women's Month, we reflect on the realities facing women in South Africa's newsrooms. Bongekile Macupe's research with the Reuters Institute makes it clear. Despite years of transformation, Black African women remain almost entirely absent from senior editorial roles. And so today we're going to be unpacking her own journey in light of these findings, the barriers faced, the vision for building newsrooms that truly are inclusive, and plenty more. And so on that note, a very good morning, Bongekile, and well done. Thank you for this much needed research and these insights. I know that it was a mirror into some harsh truths that we had to face. But we're here, and thank you for joining us to unpack.
Thank you, Lisa, and good morning to your viewers.
Let's get into, what the report highlights. Many Black African women who enter journalism, I mean, they come with passion. And then oftentimes there's early disillusionment as well. And if we fast forward, or backtrack rather, to what inspired you to first enter journalism, what was that hope for you to bring to the industry as a Black African woman?
I mean, I entered the newsroom really, Lizelle, because I had a passion. I entered the newsroom because I truly wanted to tell stories, and I think at heart I am a storyteller. So that's why I entered journalism. That's why I am a journalist today. And I think in my career, my 15 years in journalism, I have tried to tell the most authentic stories of South Africans. And I have been fortunate to work for newsrooms where I have been all over the country telling the stories of people who would have ordinarily not have been, on national platforms, or whose stories might have gone untold. So that's really why I entered journalism. I didn't, when I entered the newsroom, had any vision of how I can change the newsroom, or neither did I enter the newsroom thinking that I am going to be an activist and champion certain issues. I think more than anything, I just went into the newsroom to tell the stories of people, mainly marginalized people that I know might likely never make it onto the news, people in my village of Mtambalala in Mount Fletcher, so that's mainly why I became a journalist.
Yeah, and I mean, Bongi, we obviously then look at what's transpired over your career. You've had to get into some of the politics and some of the harsh realities, the structural barriers, the microaggressions every day. In your own experience, what were some of those biggest obstacles that you encountered in the newsroom?
I mean, like I say, I've been a journalist for 15 years, and in my 15 years in this industry, I have witnessed some of those things have happened to me. As a journalist, they are my own experiences. Some of them I've watched happen to other colleagues, Black African women journalists. But I think for me, Lizelle, the one of the biggest obstacle, or one of the things that has been said or challenging for me in this industry, is just to see how sometimes Black women journalists are so minimized, where you enter into a room and it is as though you are not there, you are so invincible, discussions are being heard in a room and you are seated there, and it is though as if your voice doesn't matter, whereas you are part of this organization. And I think for me that's one of the things that has been difficult in this career. It's one of the things where you constantly feel like you have to fight, and if you go through my report, the one that you spoke about, some of the women that I speak with, they speak exactly about that, just like being seen, being in a space where you are not seen, being in a space where your contribution is minimized, being in a space where it feels as though you are being done a favor, and that you shouldn't be there, So I think for me that has been one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my career. And there are many, obviously, that I can mention, but I think for me that one is one that stands out, and it's one that resonates with a lot of women, Black African women at that.
And Bongekile, I mean, one of your strongest themes in the research is really how race and gender intersect to disadvantage Black African women because of the social constructs. And I wonder if you look back at the intersection, how this has shaped the way you were treated compared to your colleagues. There's also the boys' club that is also, alluded to. The study then goes on to show how many women end up leaving journalism altogether. Talk to us about that fight and those challenges as well.
I think, Lizelle, at some point, some women have seen that maybe they might never win this fight, and I think sometimes I think one of the women I speak to in my study speaks about it's at some point it ends up being tiring, where you constantly feel that you have to fight for everything. You have to fight for equal pay. You have to fight that you are treated the same as your white colleague. Where it constantly feels like you are at war. And at some point, I write in my paper that at some point some women did not fall out of love with journalism, Liesel, and that's what I was picking up, especially for those who have left the industry, that even when they speak about the newsroom, their voices light up. When they speak about the stories that they've done, their voices light up, and the impact that they had. But at some point, it had to come to a realization that it's either you choose to remain here, you continuously have to fight, you wake up every day, you are exhausted because you are going into the space that minimizes you, that doesn't see you, and then it gets to a point where you feel like, actually, I matter, and actually I can go into another industry where people are going to value me, where people are going to see my impact. And eventually then that is why we have seen over the years where we see an exodus of Black African women journalists, particularly in the print and digital space, which is what I have spent my career working
Learning.
in print and digital platforms. So at some point you have to choose yourself, Lisa, and leave and go and contribute elsewhere where you
Yeah.
might be, you might be seen. And I am not saying that in other industries there aren't any of these challenges, because as other women who works in other industries have spoken to me, who say that they see themselves in this study, but at some point, after you have fought and fought and fought, you are like, let me go try and see
Yeah.
how I can operate in another space.
How did you not let those structural barriers affect your confidence and also just the work that had to be done? Because at the end of at the day, we also have to look at leadership, right? And the absence of Black women in leadership, how that affects some newsroom equity, the type of stories that also get told. How did you assert yourself to make sure that, that the accurate stories are reflected for everyone in society?
It's hard, Lizal. It's hard to remain confident. It's hard to remain, self-assured when you work in spaces that continuously diminish you. But I think I have to credit the role that Black African women that I have found in newsrooms, how they have been my anchors, how they have been my cheerleaders, and how we build this community as Black African women. And, where we cheer each other up. When you are in a newsroom and you think that I have done well and no one else in the room cheers you, but you know that you have a sister that is going to cheer you. So I think for me, that has been one of the things that has helped me in this journey. But also, Lisa, I have been very intentional early on in my career about the kind of stories that I do, and it is stories that I will fight for. It was stories that I will fight for because I think that they deserve to be in the national discourse. And that is why I would pitch stories about children of farm or of farm workers in the Northwest who were not going to school when I was still covering education. And I would go and I would fight and say, I want to go to Kuruman, where children have been stopped from going to school because the community is fighting for roads. And I will go. So for me, I have been intentional about the kind of stories that I want to tell, and I was fighting for those stories. And I have to say, I have been fortunate that I had worked in some instances under leaders who saw value in me writing those stories, that sometimes it wasn't a big fight. I didn't have to pitch, I didn't have to come up with 10 pitches and explain why that story is important, but it has always been intentionality. But I also have to emphasize my anchors, the Black African women that have been my anchors and continue to be my anchors even today. I think that is why 15 years down the line, I am still here, I am still standing strong, because I have had those anchors.
And you know, Bongi, I mean, you're speaking to also the role of journalism in society, right? We're looking at deep fakes, we're looking at misinformation, and we're looking how important it is to have that representation and inclusivity now so more than ever. Integrity, highlighting human rights, credible information as well. And so as we draw on your experience and the report's findings as well, what are some of those concrete changes that you would like newsrooms to make, to have, so that it is more equitable, more inclusive as one? And even what's your message to young Black African women entering journalism today as we wrap up Women's Month?
I think for young Black African journalists, maybe some of them who might read this paper and think, oh my God, I don't want to go into this thing if I am going to experience this. I think they need to take courage, and they need to, that conviction that they had that said that go and study journalism or whatever that you studied, but that conviction that you had that said, I want to tell the stories of South Africans. Don't let go of that. It does not matter whether you find the system to be unkind to you, but do not let go of that. Go, because we belong to be in these spaces. These spaces are not for certain people. They are for all of us, and we are South Africans, and rightfully so. We are going to be gainfully employed in these spaces, and if it means that we continue to fight, even though fighting is difficult and tiring, we will do so. So do not be discouraged. Come, you will find Bongekiles, you will find other Black African women who will open their arms and allow you and hold your hands. But also, to go back to your other point on why representation matters, I make an example, for example, Liesel, that sometimes when certain people sit in positions of power or decision making, some stories might not be told because those people do not resonate with those stories. For example.
Yep.
I was fortunate when I worked at the City Press, that I could go to my bosses and say there is a big problem of femicide, in a small village in Hlankomo, Mount Fletcher, and I would like to tell that story, and ordinarily, if you do not have people that are in touch with what is happening in certain spaces that other people might not have the opportunity to know what is happening, then it means that those stories are not going to be told. So that is why it is important that we are also in these spaces, because we come from these communities.
Bongekile.
We know some of these women, and we need to tell their stories.
And I mean, the conversation continues. We run out of time, but thank you for your honesty and thank you for sharing your experience. Of course, also the report, what it means to be a Black African woman navigating South African newsrooms. This Women's Month, you're speaking to transformation and need for equity and representation, and for a media landscape that truly reflects the voices of all South Africans. Thank you for your time at this hour.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the platform.